She covered her aunt's shift as a cleaner at a luxury hotel and was mistaken for a guest by a millionaire CEO. The rain pounded relentlessly against the tin roof of the tiny apartment, each drop echoing like a ticking clock in Emma's ears. The desk lamp flickered for the third time that evening, casting long shadows over her open textbooks. She barely noticed. Her eyes, weary from hours of studying for the prestigious medical scholarship, scanned the same sentence over and over again. Outside, thunder rumbled like a distant beast. Inside, the only sound was the scratching of her pen until her phone rang. The shrill tone startled her. She glanced at the screen. Aunt Lily. Her heart sank. "Hello, Auntie?" she answered quickly. There was a pause, a rustling noise, and then a trembling voice, hoarse and panicked. "Emma, I slipped. My ankle. I think I sprained it. I cannot go in tonight." Emma sat up straight, her muscles tensing. "What? Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm home now," Lily's voice cracked. "I tried to walk it off, but it hurts too much. I cannot stand properly. Emma, if I do not show up, they might cancel my contract. I am on probation. They already cut 2 other cleaners last week." Emma felt a sharp stab of anxiety. Her aunt had worked so hard to keep this job at Grand Avalon, the city's most luxurious hotel. It was the only steady income they had since her parents died. Emma knew what the job meant, not just to her aunt, but to her own future too. "I do not know what to do," Lily whispered, her voice choking up. "Emma, could you please, just this once, go in for me? Just clean a few rooms, just tonight." Emma froze, her mind racing. Her scholarship interview was in 2 days. She had hours of material left to revise. And this was not a normal shift. Lily had mentioned earlier that her assignment tonight was on the executive floor, the VIP section. The guests there were the richest of the rich, politicians, CEOs. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake and Lily could lose her job. Emma stood and walked toward the small window. Rain poured onto the cracked pavement outside. She took a deep breath. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it." You will?" Lily's voice was filled with disbelief and then overwhelming gratitude. "Oh, Emma, thank you. Thank you so much. The uniform is clean and hanging behind the door. The staff ID is in the pocket. Just swipe it to enter from the side entrance." Emma nodded, even though Lily could not see her. "Rest. Ice your ankle. I'll take care of it." After hanging up, Emma changed quickly. The uniform was slightly large for her, and the fabric was coarse and worn. She stared at herself in the mirror, no longer a medical student, but a hotel cleaner. She tied her hair in a low bun, like her aunt always did, and slipped the staff ID into her jacket. She left the apartment with an umbrella barely holding together and caught the last bus downtown. The city lights shimmered in the wet streets, distorted by the downpour. When she arrived at the Grand Avalon, she hesitated at the back entrance, staring up at the towering building that looked like something out of a dream. She had never been inside, not even in the lobby. With a deep breath, she swiped the ID and stepped through the staff entrance. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of citrus and polish. She was greeted with a nod from an exhausted supervisor who barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're late. Lily's replacement?" he asked without warmth. Emma nodded. "Executive floor, 10th and 16th. Some VIPs came back unexpectedly. You'll cover both. Be thorough." Without another word, he handed her a cart and turned away. Emma pushed the heavy cart into the service elevator, heart pounding. She had memorized her aunt's routine during countless dinner conversations, but doing it herself was a different story. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and she began her journey into a world far from her own. As she ascended, she whispered to herself, "Just clean a few rooms, just tonight, then go home." But fate had other plans. The staff elevator opened with a soft ding and Emma pushed the cleaning cart out onto the 10th floor. Even the hallway carpeting was plush beneath her feet, a deep navy trimmed with gold, cleaner than any floor she had ever walked on. The soft glow of crystal sconces lit the hall like a quiet palace, and the silence was unnerving. She clutched the cart handle tighter, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the building. It all felt surreal. Just hours ago she had been hunched over medical textbooks. Now she was wearing a faded cleaning uniform 2 sizes too big, her ID clipped to the front with someone else's name. She passed massive double doors, each room labeled with numbers instead of names, and imagined the lives inside: CEOs, heirs, dignitaries. She had studied people like them in sociology class. Now she was polishing their floors. Her first task was room 1501. It was unoccupied, as per the schedule her aunt had scribbled notes on. Emma swiped the MasterCard and slipped inside. The room was stunning: marble floors, velvet drapes, fresh lilies in a crystal vase. She blinked a few times and then set to work the way her aunt had described. Empty trash, replace towels, wiped surfaces, vacuum, check minibar, align toiletries with exact spacing. She moved efficiently, driven by nerves. Every knock or distant voice made her heart leap. What if someone questioned her? What if someone realized she was not on the employee list? The fear stayed with her like a shadow. Just as she was finishing up, the walkie-talkie on the cart crackled. "Anyone available on 10? Emergency request. Presidential suite on 16 needs cleaning as soon as possible. Guest checked out early due to medical issue. We need a reset before the next guest arrives. Can anyone cover?" There was silence. Emma hesitated. Her heart thudded louder than the static. She reached for the walkie and pressed the button with a shaky thumb. "I can. I'm finishing 1501 now. I'll take it." "Copy that. Room 1601. Use the private elevator if needed. Get it done quick. Next guest's arrival window is flexible." Emma swallowed hard. The presidential suite. She left 1501 as perfectly arranged as she found it and rolled the cart toward the service elevator again. The climb to the 16th floor felt steeper, heavier, as if each level added weight to her chest. When the doors slid open, she gasped softly. The 16th floor looked nothing like the rest. There were only 4 rooms, more like luxury apartment, with hallways wide enough to park a car. The walls were decorated with original art, not replicas, and a soft instrumental melody played through hidden speakers. She walked toward 1601, the double doors already ajar. A golden placard beside it read, "The Hart Presidential Suite." As she stepped inside, her breath caught. It was not a hotel room. It was a palace. The suite opened into a grand living area with high ceilings, ornate chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the stormy skyline. There were bookshelves built into mahogany walls, a baby grand piano in one corner, and a marble fireplace still faintly warm. Emma stood frozen, gripping the cart. Then she shook herself back to reality and began to work. She moved quietly, reverently, remaking the bed with military precision, fluffing the pillows, scrubbing the bathroom until it gleamed. She aligned every perfume bottle and glass like they were surgical tools. As she worked, she wondered what kind of person lived in such a space. What did they do to deserve it? How could anyone need this much space alone? An hour passed. Emma was kneeling beside the fireplace, wiping the last of the soot from the marble, when the door behind her clicked. She did not turn at first. She thought it might be housekeeping, double-checking something. But then a voice, a deep, steady one, spoke behind her. "Well, this is unexpected." Emma's hands froze mid-wipe. That voice was not a cleaner's. She turned slowly, and the man standing in the doorway was unmistakable. Tall, sharp-suited despite the late hour, with silver at his temples and a phone still in his hand. He looked like he stepped out of a business magazine cover. His eyes narrowed slightly as they scanned her face. Then he raised one eyebrow and offered a tight, knowing smile. "I was not informed of any surprise arrangements tonight, but I suppose Grand Avalon still knows how to keep its top clients entertained." Emma's mouth opened, then shut. Her blood ran cold. "What? What do you mean?" she stammered. The man tilted his head, amused. "You can drop the act. It is fine. I do not need the extra attention, but thank you anyway." Emma stared at him, horrified. "I am just cleaning," she whispered. He blinked, confused for a moment, then skeptical. "You are? A cleaner?" Emma could not answer. Her eyes filled with tears. She grabbed her cloth, stood up, and backed away. "I am sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I will leave." She left the cart, her aunt's ID, everything, and ran. The moment Emma turned to face him, the stillness of the presidential suite shattered. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the cloth, her breathing uneven, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The man standing by the door studied her for a long beat. He set down his phone on the side table with slow deliberation, his gaze fixed on her like he was trying to place her in a context that made sense. He took a few steps forward, his voice low, tinged with sardonic amusement. "You know," he said, "I thought I told them I was not interested in this kind of service anymore." Emma blinked. I'm sorry?" "The hotel," he clarified, as though she were in on a private joke. "They like to be discreet with their VIP guests. A little after-hours surprise. It is not the first time they have done this, but I told them to stop." He motioned vaguely toward her, as if that explained everything. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She was too stunned to speak. He misread her silence as part of the act. "No need to be nervous," he continued with a slight smile. "Really, you can relax. I had a long day, and I just want some quiet tonight. You do not need to go through the whole routine." The words felt like ice in her ears. "What?" she finally whispered. "You are not the first girl they have sent. But this time they went for something a little more subtle, less flashy, more innocent looking. I must admit, they have a good eye for performance." Emma's face drained of color. "Performance?" she echoed. He nodded, then chuckled softly. "You are very convincing. The whole lost-in-the-room look, the humble clothes, the wide-eyed innocence. It is a bit overdone, but charming." She stepped back as if he had struck her. Her lips parted in disbelief. "I'm not," she tried to say, but her throat tightened. Her voice rose in desperation. "I'm not a performer. I'm not some thing you get with a sweet upgrade." The man's expression faltered, just for a second. "I'm here cleaning," she snapped, her voice sharper now, wounded. "My aunt couldn't make it, and I'm helping her, that's all. I'm not part of some disgusting fantasy package." The last word cracked out of her like a slap. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a flicker of doubt. "Wait," he said. "You're serious?" Emma's eyes glistened. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "How dare you? Just because I'm in this room, wearing a cheap uniform, doesn't mean I'm for sale." He stepped forward, alarmed now. "I didn't mean—" But she was already moving. Her breath hitched. She turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. On her way out, her elbow struck the cleaning cart, knocking it askew. Her aunt's ID badge slipped off her chest and fell to the carpet face down. He called after her again. "Wait, I made a mistake. I didn't—" Emma yanked the door open and rushed into the hallway, the opulent silence closing behind her like a wall. Inside, Alexander stood frozen. He stared at the door, then slowly turned his head to the cart she had left behind. He walked over, picked up the ID from the floor, and read the name. Lily Mendez. Not Emma. He glanced back at the door, his brows furrowing. He was many things, ruthless in business, cold with strangers, but not cruel by nature. And what he had just done? It replayed in his mind with growing unease. The way she looked at him, not offended like someone overacting in a role, but genuinely hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. Back in the hallway, Emma took the staff stairs 2 steps at a time, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. She had never been so humiliated in her life. All she wanted was to help her aunt, finish her task quietly, and go home. But instead, she had been mistaken for something vile, something less than human. And the way he had looked at her, like she was just another amenity in his luxury suite, burned deep in her chest. She made it back to the staff lounge, stripped the uniform off with shaking fingers, and changed into her own clothes. Her aunt's ID was gone, but she could not go back for it. Not now. He left the hotel through the same back entrance, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but her face was already wet. She walked the long way home, her thoughts spiraling. One night, one simple favor. That was all it was supposed to be. She had no idea how one misunderstanding in a luxury suite would change the course of her entire life. Alexander Hart stood alone in the presidential suite long after the girl had vanished. The silence pressed down on him harder than before. The fire in the marble hearth had long gone out, yet he remained near it, staring at the ID badge in his hand. Lily Mendez, it read. He turned it over again, as if the name might change. But the photo on the badge was unmistakably not the girl who had just fled the room. He felt something twist in his gut. He had seen hundreds of women attempt to use charm or manipulation for access, favors, or money. He had trained himself to spot deception from miles away. But tonight, something about her didn't add up. She had not flirted, she had not played coy, she had looked terrified, hurt, humiliated. Not like someone caught in a lie, but someone accused of something vile. Alexander ran a hand over his jaw, a flicker of guilt tightening across his chest. He walked over to the phone on the desk and dialed the security office. "This is Hart," he said. "I want access to the hallway and suite camera footage from the past 2 hours. Floor 16. Now." "Yes, Mr. Hart," came the immediate response. 10 minutes later, he sat before a monitor in the private office downstairs, reviewing the footage. He watched as the girl, still unnamed, pushed the cart into the hallway. She struggled to maneuver it, clearly unfamiliar with the layout. She entered the suite without hesitation, working quickly and methodically, her movements clean, efficient, no trace of seduction or anything else out of place. There was no one else with her, no handoff, no signs of a planned encounter. She was, simply, doing her job, or rather, someone else's. "Who is she?" Alexander asked quietly. The head of security shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the badge she used belongs to Lily Mendez, longtime cleaning staff, but that wasn't Lily. We can run facial recognition through employee records if you'd like." "No," Alexander interrupted. "Just give me everything you have on Mendez. Address, schedule, family information." Of course, back in his suite, Alexander sat with the file open on his tablet. Lily Mendez, 57, employed at Grand Avalon for 7 years, 0 disciplinary marks, lived in a working-class neighborhood east of the city, 1 dependent listed under her emergency contact, Emma Mendez. The name jolted him. He stared at it for a long moment. Emma. That must have been her. He didn't know what disturbed him more, the fact that he had insulted a young woman who was clearly trying to help her injured aunt, or the fact that he had looked at her with the same cold detachment he reserved for transactional encounters. Her face returned to his mind in perfect clarity, wide brown eyes filled with tears, the way her voice broke, the rawness of her pain. He was a man known for never second-guessing himself. Tonight, he could not stop. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, but the city below still shimmered with leftover stormlight. For years he had lived his life in precision, deals, data, control. Feelings were inconvenient. People were assets or liabilities. But that girl, Emma, was neither. She was real. And he had reduced her to something less than human in a single, careless assumption. Alexander turned away from the window, jaw tight. He reached for his phone and dialed his executive assistant. "Claire," he said when she answered groggily. "First thing tomorrow morning, I want you to schedule a private meeting with the hotel manager. I also need background on all cleaning staff assigned to executive floors in the past 72 hours. And find me a phone number or address for Emma Mendez." Claire paused. "Of course, sir. May I ask why?" Alexander exhaled slowly, staring at the ID badge still resting on his nightstand. "Because I made a mistake," he said, "and I intend to fix it." 2 days later, Alexander Hart stood in front of a faded green door in a narrow hallway of a low-income housing complex on the east side of the city. The building smelled faintly of mildew and boiled vegetables, a stark contrast to the marble and eucalyptus-scented air of the Grand Avalon. He adjusted the collar of his coat and knocked twice. The door creaked open, and a woman in her late 50s peeked out, her eyes wary until she recognized him from photographs and news articles. "Mr. Hart?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he said with a polite nod. "You must be Ms. Mendez." She blinked, then opened the door wider with some effort, leaning on a cane. "Forgive me," she said, "my ankle's still healing. Come in, if you don't mind the mess." The apartment was small but clean. A worn couch sat in the middle of a modest living room, next to a stack of medical books and empty tea mugs. The television was off, and the air was filled with the scent of lavender and menthol ointment. Alexander stepped in, taking in the modest surroundings. He had been in boardrooms more opulent than most ballrooms, but this space, humble and personal, made him oddly quiet. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said gently. Lily offered a tired smile as she settled onto the couch. "I guessed that. You're not exactly the suing type, but I know why you're here." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You figured out it wasn't me cleaning that night," Lily said. "I heard from one of the staff that you were asking questions." "About Emma," he nodded slowly. "Yes, I realized I made a mistake, a serious one." Lily looked down, twisting the hem of her sweater. "She was only trying to help me. I had fallen, twisted my ankle bad, and if I missed that shift, I was afraid I'd lose my job. So she offered to go, just for one night." Alexander remained silent. "She begged me not to tell anyone," Lily continued, her voice growing softer. "Said if someone found out she wasn't staff, I'd be fired. She thought she could just go in, clean a few rooms, and leave without anyone noticing." "But someone did," Alexander murmured. Lily nodded. "She hasn't stopped crying since." He looked at the books on the table again. "Medical school?" "She's in her final year, applying for a scholarship. Works 2 part-time jobs and still studies till midnight. I keep telling her she's burning the candle at both ends, but she says it's the only way." Alexander let out a slow breath. "She didn't deserve what I said to her." "No," Lily agreed, "but she understands why you thought what you did. She knows how people like her are seen, especially by people like you." There was no accusation in her voice, just tired truth. Alexander stood. "Can I speak with her?" Lily looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "She's at campus most of the day, med building, room 213. She volunteers in the free clinic after class. She's hard to miss." The university campus buzzed with life. Students on bikes, others huddled over laptops, and the occasional clatter of coffee cups. Alexander stood out like a lighthouse among the sea of youth, tall, suited, and out of place. He walked into the medical building and found room 213 easily. Through the glass window of the clinic reception, he spotted her. Emma. She was seated at a desk, sorting medication samples into labeled trays. Her hair was tied back neatly, and she wore a white coat slightly too big for her. Despite her tired eyes, she moved with purpose. He knocked softly. Emma looked up and froze. She rose to her feet slowly, lips parting in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Her voice wasn't angry, just small and cautious. "I came to apologize," he said. She hesitated. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk. "If you're here to report me or my aunt—" "I'm not," he cut in gently. "I would never. Emma, I realized how wrong I was. I saw the footage. I saw how you worked, how careful and respectful you were. You weren't pretending. You weren't anything close to what I accused you of." She blinked rapidly, tears forming again. "I misjudged you, horribly," he continued. "I've spent years around people who only want something from me. I've gotten used to assuming the worst. That night, I let that cynicism get the best of me. But you," he swallowed, "you were just trying to help someone you love." Emma's lower lip trembled. She turned away, covering her face with one hand. Alexander waited in silence until she found her voice. "I didn't mean to end up in your room," she said, voice cracking. "I was just trying to do a good job. My aunt means everything to me." "I know," he said softly, "and you did more than a good job. You reminded me that not everything in this world has a price." She looked at him, startled. He smiled, genuinely, without arrogance. "I've met thousands of people, Emma, but I've never met someone who showed more strength and humility in a single moment than you did that night." She stood in silence, tears streaming now, her guard beginning to lower. For the first time since that awful night, she didn't feel ashamed, only seen. Alexander stepped forward carefully and extended a hand. "Would you allow me to make it right?" Emma sat at her desk late one evening, the gentle hum of the campus clinic still echoing in her ears. She rubbed her eyes, weary from a full day of rotations, when her phone buzzed softly beside her. The screen lit up with a message that simply read, "Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with no pressure at all." Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she typed back, "Okay, noon? Perfect." When she met Alexander the next day, it was not in a lavish restaurant or a private lounge, but at a quiet cafe near campus, her favorite study spot, where the coffee was too strong and the chairs creaked, but the sunlight hit the windows just right. He was already there, sitting at a small corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw her, no longer the towering CEO from glossy magazines, but a man in a simple navy sweater and dark jeans, looking a little too tall for the space, but somehow fitting. "I took a chance," he said, offering her one of the cups. "The girl behind the counter said you always ordered this." Emma took it, surprised. "You remembered?" "I try to remember important things," he said, and the sincerity in his voice left her without a reply. They spoke for a while, about school, about patients she'd seen, about the chaos of juggling studies and survival. Then, midway through a pause, Alexander reached into his coat pocket and placed a folder on the table. "This is from the Heart Foundation," he said. "We have a new scholarship program for medical students who've demonstrated exceptional resilience and character. It includes tuition coverage, a living stipend, and access to research and field opportunities across our global health initiatives." Emma stared at it, stunned. He held her gaze gently. "It's not charity. You earned this. That night in that suite, you didn't just clean a room. You showed more dignity than most people do in a lifetime." She shook her head slowly. "I can't accept this just because you feel guilty." "It's not guilt," he said. "It's recognition and respect." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was her name, printed boldly. Her chest tightened. Over the following weeks, they continued to speak, at first through short check-ins, then longer conversations. Sometimes he asked how her exams were going, sometimes she asked about his latest board meeting or the places he traveled. She never expected him to reply, yet he always did, thoughtfully, sometimes with humor, always with a kind of quiet patience that unsettled her. Emma found herself thinking about him more often than she wanted to admit. Alexander, too, felt something shift. It had started with guilt, yes, but now it had grown into something he could not ignore. Emma's honesty disarmed him. Her lack of pretense was like air after years of fog. He watched the way she spoke to people, never condescending, always listening. She remembered the names of janitors and security guards. She stopped to help strangers without a second thought. She lived as though kindness was her default. It humbled him, and it made him wonder how he had gone so long without someone like her in his life. One afternoon, after they had finished a site visit for a new community clinic his foundation was funding, they stood outside under the late spring sun, the city humming softly around them. "You've changed," she said quietly. Alexander turned to her. "How so?" "You're softer," she said. "More open," he chuckled. "That's not what my board says." Emma smiled but looked away. "I just mean, I think the world used to feel like a battlefield to you. Now it seems like you're trying to heal it instead of conquer it." He didn't answer right away. Then softly he said, "You made me want to." She looked back at him, startled. Alexander stepped a little closer, not imposing but earnest. "Emma, I have built empires, negotiated billion-dollar deals, been in rooms with kings and presidents, but nothing has shaken me more than the way you looked at me that night when I misunderstood you, and nothing has stayed with me longer than the grace you showed afterward." Emma's heart pounded. "We're from different worlds," she whispered. "I don't belong in yours." "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice firm but warm. "You belong anywhere you choose, and if you'll allow it, I'd like to be part of that world, wherever it is." She searched his face, looking for arrogance, for pretense, but found only truth. And for the first time, she let herself smile, not just politely but fully, not because he was a CEO, but because he was Alexander. And she was no longer afraid. A year passed like the turning of a page, quiet yet profound. Emma had graduated from medical school with honors, her white coat ceremony marked not by pomp but by quiet pride. She had earned a position as an intern at a respected city hospital. And though the hours were long and the pay modest, she walked each corridor with purpose. She no longer feared the future. It felt, for the first time, like something she had shaped with her own hands. Throughout that year, Alexander remained present, not intrusively, but with quiet consistency. A thoughtful message during exam season, a warm cup of tea left backstage at a lecture she gave, occasional dinners where he listened more than he spoke. He never pressed her. He never tried to impress her. And perhaps that was what impressed her the most. Then came the night of the Foundation's annual charity gala, a luminous evening held at the Grand Avalon itself. Emma stood in front of the same grand doors where her story had begun, now dressed in an elegant navy gown, her hair swept back, her posture strong. Inside, the ballroom shimmered under cascading lights. Guests in black tuxedos and sequined gowns sipped champagne and made polite conversation, unaware of the quiet, extraordinary story walking among them. Alexander, as host, gave the final speech of the night. He stood beneath a golden chandelier, his presence commanding as always, but his voice when he began was softer than expected, reverent. "I've built a life measured by contracts and market shares," he said, scanning the room. "For a long time I believe value came from status, wealth, efficiency. But this year I met someone who unraveled that belief completely." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Alexander continued, his gaze drifting briefly toward the back of the room, where Emma stood still. Her breath caught. She wasn't a partner, not a donor, not a CEO. She was someone I met by accident, though I think now, not really by accident at all. Someone who walked into my world for one night and reminded me what grace, strength, and true dignity look like. Silence followed, deeper than before. "I want to thank her," he said, "because without her, I might still be chasing everything that matters least." He stepped down to a wave of polite applause, but his eyes never left Emma's. Later, as guests mingled and the music swelled, Emma wandered to the balcony for air. The city lights twinkled below like 1,000 fireflies, and for a moment, she let herself breathe. "Emma." His voice was quiet behind her. She turned. Alexander stepped forward, his expression open but uncertain, something rare for a man who always seemed to know what to say. "I meant every word," he said. She nodded, unsure what to say in return. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You know, I've negotiated mergers between companies worth billions and faced off against the world's most ruthless competitors, but nothing has made me more nervous than this moment." Emma's lips curved, just slightly. "Why?" "Because," he said, his voice low, sincere, "what I feel for you isn't calculated. It's not strategic. It's terrifyingly real." She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "I used to think I understood people," he continued. "Used to think I could read them, predict them. But then a girl showed up in my suite one rainy night, not to impress, not to gain anything, but simply to help someone she loved. And she changed everything I thought I knew." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "I've fallen in love with you," he said, "not because of anything you've done to win me over, but because of everything you are when you think no one's watching. I love your quiet courage, your compassion, your integrity. I love you simply as you are." For a long moment she could not speak. The city lights blurred in her eyes. Then, wordlessly, she reached out and took his hand. His breath caught. She still said nothing. But her fingers, wrapping gently around his, told him everything he needed to know. The years that followed were not marked by headlines or grandeur, but by quiet, meaningful moments. Early morning walks, coffee in hospital break rooms, notes tucked into suitcases before long flights. Emma and Alexander, once strangers bound by a misunderstanding, built a life that was simple, real, and deeply theirs. Emma thrived in her medical career, known for her intellect and unwavering empathy. She treated patients with kindness, remembered their names, and never let success alter her essence. Her coat was always clean, her heart always open. Alexander, though still leading his empire, began shifting his priorities. Inspired by Emma, he expanded the Heart Foundation, focusing on community clinics, scholarships, and mental health programs, things he once overlooked. He moved from skyscrapers to service, from power to purpose. Fine, Stepsy, Nora. Their relationship remained private. There were no public declarations, no magazine covers. But those who knew them could see it, in the way he looked at her, in how she smiled just a little softer when he entered the room. Aunt Lily, happily retired, lived in the home Emma bought for her. She gardened, sewed with neighborhood kids, and often teased Alexander about the first night they met. "You thought she was part of some hotel surprise," she'd laugh. "Now look who's surprised." Years later, at the opening of a children's hospital, Alexander stood at the podium in a simple gray suit. Emma watched quietly from the wings. "When I was younger," he said, "I thought success meant chasing more money, more recognition. But one night, I met someone who showed me the truth." He paused, his gaze finding Emma. She didn't try to impress. She simply helped someone she loved. She didn't demand anything, but gave everything. She reminded me that the rarest things in life aren't bought, they're found. He smiled, eyes soft. "I once searched for luxury, but my heart was conquered by something far greater, a woman who never needed to be given anything because she herself was the gift." The room was silent, deeply moved. Emma wiped a tear, her heart full, and in that quiet it was clear. This was a story not of luck, but of love, not of wealth, but of worth, and of how the greatest journeys often begin with a single, unexpected mistake. Thank you for staying with us through this deeply moving journey. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, or made you believe in the beauty of second chances, then it did exactly what we hoped it would do. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in telling tales that heal, inspire, and awaken something tender inside all of us. Stories of resilience, of love that crosses boundaries, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, not with noise, but with heart. If you felt something today, we invite you to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories so you never miss another story that speaks to your soul, because sometimes the smallest moments hold the greatest meaning. We'll see you in the next story.